Okay, so again, thanks so much for joining. If you haven't scanned the QR code, that is the best way to keep up to date with the next masterclass events that we've got coming. So make sure you scan that and we'll throw that up towards the end of the session as well. Follow us on LinkedIn and you should see the invites there. So let's get started. So what are we going to cover today? So 45 minutes is pretty short, and we went for 45 minutes just because an hour seemed a little bit too long, and I always like to leave time between my meetings, so hopefully you'll do the same. So we're going to run through a really quick introduction. So why are we here? Why are we running this masterclass? Scene with a bit of context on how to sell design workshops and employee experience internally. So if you're putting together a proposal for an EX design workshop, these are the kind of insights or suggestions that you can put into your proposal. Next, we're going to run through some expectations. So 90 minutes is relatively short. I mean, longer than a 60-minute meeting, of course, but relatively short in the design world. So we'll run through what you can expect to achieve. We'll talk about some of the tools. So the tools that we use here at wrkflow, so communication platforms, etc. And then we'll run through the format. So this is the real meaty part of today's masterclass, is what does a 90-minute workshop look like? What would the ideal agenda be? And then we'll run through a few facilitation workshop tips. I have the chat box here open and the Q&A field as well, so feel free to use both of those. Just as a quick added extra, so at the end of the workshop today, we'll follow up with an email to everybody that's registered, and we will include a digital workshop checklist. So this is something for you to keep, save it to your desktop, save it wherever you need to, and you can use this when you're planning your internal workshop or when you're running your workshop, and this will just help you cover off, have I got the right agenda set? Have I sent out my objectives, etc., etc. So you're welcome for that. And we'll also include the masterclass recording and a link to our workshop Spotify playlist. So we use Spotify playlists a lot when we're doing some silent ideation, which I'll come on to talk a little bit about further into the presentation. Now, to encourage everybody to chat and share their own experiences with workshops, we really want people to use the chat function. So if you are sending messages in there and getting involved in the conversation, you will be put into a prize draw to win a wrkflow workshop kit. Now, this workshop kit is designed to be used for in-person workshops, but hey, you can use it at home. You could throw it up on your whiteboard and have it on the background, but make sure you're using the chat, and we really encourage you to do that. So who are wrkflow? Who am I? So I'm Sasha, I'm the MD here at wrkflow. We are a dedicated employee experience design agency, and everything I'm going to talk you through is everything we do with our clients. So often this is kind of longer programs of work over a year, or potentially longer, potentially shorter, but everything we do is centered around employee experience design. So we help organizations redesign their employee experiences to create an engaged, inspired and productive workforce. And you'll see on the right-hand side here in my little make do post-it note, and these are some of the specific design offerings that we have. So design labs, which are essentially extended versions of what we're going to run through today, strategy and vision workshops, employee persona creation, the list goes on. So we absolutely love working in this space, and we're working with a lot of clients across the region who have really enjoyed employing some of these workshop skills. So we'll run through those examples today. So just to clarify very quickly, and again, feel free to use the chat to let me know what your thoughts are around this employee experience definition, but we define employee experience as the sum of the experiences your employees encounter as part of your organization. So it's about how we work, why we work, and where we work. So similar to walking past a shop and deciding whether or not you're going to go in, and when you go in and you've got that customer experience going and you're finding what you're looking for, that is kind of the best analogy that I tend to use to describe what the employee experience is. It's everything before you step into that shop, during that shopping experience, and then when you leave as well. And then on the right-hand side, what is human-centered design thinking? So this is a definition from IDEO, which I'll come on to talk a bit about later. So human-centered design thinking is a creative approach to problem solving that starts with people and ends with innovative solutions that are tailor-made to suit their needs. And if we combine the two of these together, we get employee experience design. So we're really putting the employee at the heart of the enterprise experience and really looking at employee experience as a strategic, well, not just an initiative, but it really embracing employee experience going forward and design principles as well. So I'm going to do a quick poll just to see where everybody is at with their workshop experience. So I'm just going to relaunch this poll and allow you all to vote. And just let me know have you facilitated an EX design workshop before? So we'll let this run for a couple of seconds. Let me know where you're at. Okay. Okay, cool. We've got quite a few votes coming in, which is fantastic. Generally speaking, not a lot of experience with facilitating an EX design workshop, which is great. Some experience, and we've got a couple of people. Okay, brilliant. We'll wrap that survey up now. Fabulous. Okay. So the large majority, 78% of attendees who have joined today do not have any experience with facilitating an EX design workshop, which is fab for me. And hopefully I'll be able to share some insights with you. So, okay, let's move on. So an EX design workshop, why are they useful? So this comes back to the concept of selling workshops internally. So I tend to talk about three concepts here. So the first is you're able to align stakeholders on the vision and objectives if you have everybody in the same room. Really key. If you are making decisions around your vision and objective offline through multiple emails, through separate discussions, it's going to take a lot longer, and people tend to be attached to different objectives or unclear on what the overall objective is as it relates to your EX project or your EX strategy. The second is it drives a truly employee-centric outcome. So if we're in the room and we're putting the employee first during that workshop, we're making sure that that is the center of the conversation. We're talking about improving the experience and removing the challenges associated with the experience today. And then the last one is you're typically going to solve your employee experience challenges faster, right? We all know this. Emails go back and forth. Someone's going to take 3 or 4 days to reply. It's not a very efficient way of coming up with solutions to your EX challenges. So having EX design workshops will really help you solve your challenges a lot faster. So moving on. So why 90 minutes? So you would have seen on the title of today's masterclass, so running an effective design workshop in less than 90 minutes. So 90 minutes is a good amount of time, especially if you're running these virtually. As I'm sure we're all aware now, you tend to lose people at around the 60-minute mark. People will rush off, they'll turn their cameras off, they become less engaged, they're less forthcoming with suggestions. So 90 minutes is a pretty good time frame for at least the initial EX design workshop. It keeps people engaged, and as long as you've got a break factored into your agenda, it's a pretty good time frame for people to feel inspired and keep on being a little bit creative. That said, what can you achieve in 90 minutes? So this is just a bit of a caveat, a curb your expectations, if you like. 90 minutes isn't a very long time in the grand scheme of things. You know, people have design workshops that run across multiple days, potentially multiple weeks when it comes to product design, service design as well. So be really realistic about what you can achieve within that 90-minute time frame. So when you're thinking about what your objective is, just be quite realistic. And generally speaking, at Workflow, if we're using a 90-minute workshop, we'll be doing some problem framing. So really trying to understand what is the challenge with a specific experience. We'll do some solution ideation. So what are the potential solutions that we can throw out here to address those problems that we framed? And then solution prioritization. So having everybody in the room to agree, okay, these are the solutions that we've put forward. Which ones are going to drive the most impact at the lowest cost as possible? So not too big and not too small. You want it to be significant. You want it to be enough that people are going to say, yes, this is a worthwhile investment of my time, but not too big that you're leaving people feeling a little bit disappointed that they haven't achieved everything. So just a few examples. These are practical examples, workshops that we've run with our clients across the region. So it could be, how do we reduce onboarding process complexity? So getting the right people in the room to talk about that for 90 minutes. Creating a more supportive return to work experience for working mothers, maximizing digital HR self-service adoption, creating a promotion process that inspires, managing a hybrid working arrangement, and creating more meaningful performance conversations. So hopefully those are kind of useful examples for you as to what could that overarching topic be? Why are we going to invest our time for 90 minutes to talk about these issues? So as I say, nothing too big, but nothing too small and insignificant either. So before we get into the format and getting started with the planning, these are just a couple of tips that we'd like to put out there. It's really important that before you kick off your workshop, you have got a very clearly defined and documented set of objectives. So what are you trying to achieve from your workshop? And this is really important because there will always be attendees or stakeholders that you invite that say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing a workshop? Why do we need to invest 90 minutes of our time? And having a really clearly set out objective means that your agenda, the format, and everything you produce, as well as everyone that you invite, is relevant to driving that out objective and driving results. So, for example, if the objective is we want to improve the return to work process, we want to get everybody in a room to discuss the top 3 initiatives that are going to make the return to work experience much easier for our working mothers, for example. So just be really, really clear and make sure that that is set out before the workshop. So send an email probably a week before the workshop to say, you know, hey, everyone, really looking forward to the workshop at the end of the week. Just a reminder, here's the objective for the session. Please come prepared with thoughts and ideas. And likewise, when you kick off your workshop, throw that objective up into a slide or however you're going to present, and just make sure that everybody is clear on what the objective is. I have been in workshops before where that hasn't been defined, and it tends to create some frustration pretty early on, and you end up having 1 or 2 people in the room who try to kind of overhaul the agenda, or they try to switch up how things are being done. So having a really clear objective, communicating it before is really key. The second is understanding. So this is really important, especially if you are removed from the process that you're going to be talking about or the experience that you're going to be talking about. So what I mean here is having a call with the stakeholder that owns the process. So for example, if it is onboarding, making sure that you're reaching out to the onboarding owner before the session to get a really good understanding of how the process operates today. And I guess a preliminary overview of what the challenges are as well. So try to familiarize yourself with the current experience as much as you can before that workshop. If you can, having an as-is map of here's how the process runs today, or here's how the experience is managed today, will really help you as well. This just means that you can also send that out in addition to your objectives so that everybody is clear on what the as-is experience is today. And this is important because otherwise you tend to get people coming into the workshop talking about different variants of the experience or saying, that's not how I experience it. So getting everybody aligned on what the current experience is today is really key. Another aspect of this is data. And so I'll come on to talk about this shortly about do we involve employees in this workshop, but data is really key. So if you have insights or feedback on the onboarding process, for example, before your workshop, make sure you familiarize yourself with that. And if possible, maybe throw up a slide or a quick briefing on what some of those insights are to frame some of the challenges. The last is stakeholders. So again, before you send your invite, make sure you know who to invite. So for example, with onboarding, you want to invite all of the key players as part of that process. So who is it that owns the end-to-end process? Who manages the kind of first day interaction? Who manages the follow-up with employees? Who from the recruitment team is managing the initial engagement? You know, however you define that onboarding process, making sure that you've invited the right stakeholders. You also want to make sure that you've got some variety in there as well. You don't want everybody to have the same opinion. You don't want it to become an echo chamber of everybody's experiences, and then you're designing in isolation. So should we invite employees? This is a really good question. And I think it really depends on the objective or the scope of your workshop. So if the scope of your workshop is to gather feedback on potential initiatives, and that runs for 90 minutes, then yes, it might be a good idea to involve some employees. However, if your initial 90-minute workshop is focusing on how might we improve the process, what are the challenges with the process today, then I would probably suggest not inviting employees to that workshop, simply because it kind of inhibits people from being really open about the challenges associated with the process today, and employees are less forthcoming with feedback. So generally speaking, I would say if you're running a series of workshops, there will be a time where you want to involve employees to validate your ideas and make sure that they're connected with what the business really needs. But if it's a problem framing workshop, then no, I would probably avoid it. So what are the tools you need? Right, so we're jumping straight into this now. So there are 3 key things here. So first of all, a great communications platform. So we typically use Zoom. I much prefer the Zoom capabilities. I think it's much better at running workshops from an audio sharing or a video sharing perspective than Teams. But that said, Zoom doesn't always work for everybody. So Teams is a perfectly suitable alternative. Make sure that everybody's comfortable using it, make sure that people can access the platform as well. I have run some workshops where we spent the first 20 minutes having to shift everybody over because actually nobody could get Zoom and we didn't check it before. So that is an honest lesson that we've learned. So learn from our mistakes there. The second is really key, digital ideation tools. Now, the 2 that tend to be spoken about the most are Mural and Miro, and I'm going to run you through how we structure our Mural exercises. But both of these are fantastic. They're essentially digital whiteboards. So we use Mural all of the time for focus groups, internal planning, whenever it is we want to get some ideas together and chuck them up onto a whiteboard, but we can't do it together. This is the tool that we use. And make sure, if you can, that you're embedding any kind of introductory slides into your Mural template or your Miro template. It just saves you from jumping in and out of different tools. It keeps it consistent. And then the last thing you need is a backup plan. So as I touched on earlier, if you're using Zoom, make sure you've got an alternative setup if people just cannot use that tool. And likewise with Teams, if you're experiencing audio issues or people can't use the functionality, switch over to Zoom. So always have a backup plan. I've experienced them all. My audio has stopped working partway through. These things will always happen and it's okay. Just keep your cool, but try and be as prepared as possible. Okay, so what does a workshop format and agenda look like in 90 minutes? So this is our recipe, if you like, for an effective 90-minute session. So a quick 10 minutes on introduction, which I'll come on to talk about. 60 minutes on the big meaty virtual ideation section and 10 minutes on next steps, 5 minutes to close and 5 minutes as a buffer. Now, 10 minutes for an introduction, a lot of people have said, God, that seems a little bit too long. Now, realistically, this is to give you enough time to kind of battle those technical issues. People will always be a couple of minutes late. Someone's going to run and get a coffee. You just want to give yourself that time without compromising that 60-minute virtual ideation session. So I'm going to run you through each of these and just talk through how we structure each of these sections. So introduction first. So there are 4 elements here that we wanted to share with the introduction. So the first one is getting everybody online, getting everybody set up, ready to use Zoom or Teams or whatever it is, and ready to go. The first part of any introduction is what is a workshop. So we tend to run through very quickly for everybody on the call, what is a workshop and why are we doing this? So you might be familiar with a design workshop because you planned the workshop, but not everybody is. So do a quick workshop 101, maybe even give some examples of organizations that use design workshops to create products or services. Typically throwing in some examples of Google or Microsoft is really important. The second is objectives. So as I've already touched upon, making sure that you throw up very quickly, what is the objective of today's session? Why are we here? The third is an agenda. So throwing up an agenda probably just after the objective slide that you have or the objective section. And this is just to show everybody what to expect with that 90 minutes. I would avoid timestamping the details just because then it gives you the flexibility to give a little bit of extra time to the ideation session, for example, and you're not stressing about it and people aren't expecting you to move from one element to another. So definitely throw up an agenda, but avoid timestamping it. And then warm up. So if you've got a variety of stakeholders who maybe aren't too familiar with each other, or they're potentially from different parts of the business, so you've got IT stakeholders and HR stakeholders, give them a warm-up activity. Don't do anything too laborious, but just something like, hey, can you introduce yourself, your role, and the best thing that happened to you in 2020? Or tell us something that you would change if you were to go back in time. Something that is quite personal, but it just allows people to open up a little bit and warm up. The other thing is you want to encourage people to keep their cameras on. It's nothing like an in-person workshop, unfortunately, but at least we feel like we've got that personal interaction going as a group. So jumping into the 60-minute chunk here of virtual ideation. So I think if there's anything that you take away from this masterclass today, it would be this section. So how do we actually get stuff done within this workshop timeframe? And we really use, for the 90-minute sessions, a 3-phase approach. And these are the 3 phases. The first is, what are the critical challenges and opportunities? So this is about framing the problem statement. The second is, how might we address those challenges? And the third is, how can we take this forward? So within a limited time frame, you really want to be pushing people towards action, but following a very clear narrative. So everybody's on the same page. We're not rushing towards solutioning. We're framing and understanding the challenge. So again, I tend to do this using Mural and Miro, and I will show you a real example that we've done with a client in December last year, just to really bring this to life. But as I say, if you're going to take anything from today's masterclass, it's this 3-phase approach. It's very simple. Most people understand it. It's very clear, and you can get it done within 60 minutes. So here's the example. So we did this with a very, very large insurer here in this region, and it was a quick fire 90-minute workshop. And the context was, how do we improve the return to work process for working mothers returning after maternity leave? So following that 3-phase structure, we started with, what is the challenge? And again, why are we doing this? It's to get everybody on the same virtual page. So the format of this section or this phase can change depending on what you think is best for your organization and what you think the objective is. But for this example, we decided to look at personas. So we got everybody on the call. There were about 8 of us during this session. We got everybody to use Post-it notes to mark by employee, manager, and HR, what are the challenges with the process today? And you'll see kind of supporting questions here within each of the grey boxes, which are, what are the challenges faced by mothers returning to work at our organization? What are the challenges for managers reboarding new mothers? And what are the challenges for HR? And again, this is scene setting. This is setting the context, getting everybody on the same page. So we're clear what the process is at the moment. What are the challenges? And framing those key challenges. So once everybody has spent probably 10 minutes working, typically in silence for us, we get everybody working in silence and dumping the Post-it notes onto the board. Once they've done that, we then take a step back and we say, fantastic work. We've got a real variety of Post-it notes in each of these sections. Would anybody like to take themselves off mute and talk us through what you've written down? Generally speaking, there's 1 or 2 that will always take themselves off mute. So you might want to control that by inviting people specifically to talk about what are some of the challenges that they have. 2 seconds. Sorry, everybody, having a technical issue. Give me a second. 1 second. Okay. Apologies, everybody. Let me just try this. This always happens. Here we go. Okay, we're back. We'll just use 1 screen today. So apologies for that, everybody. So then once you've got everybody talking about what are some of those key challenges, you might want to get them to vote. So you could use little icons in your mural board to get everybody to vote on the challenges they think are the most relevant. So for example, if people have put in the biggest employee challenges that they don't know what to expect, everybody will move a dot to that Post-it note to say, yes, this is the primary challenge. The next is that this could be done collaboratively or done in silence. So whatever works for you and your organization. Phase 2 is, how might we address those challenges? So this is where we shift everybody from what are the problems to what are the solutions, and how might we, as a really popular human-centered design kind of technique or question that we like to ask, and it just allows people to think quite broadly about the solutions that will address those challenges. So as an example, in the context of this session, we looked at, so sorry, everybody, I hope you can still see me. Okay, everyone can see me, but I cannot see my screen. which is very frustrating. I'm not sure what has happened with my laptop. Give me 2 seconds, everybody. Okay. Okay. So I think everybody can see. Okay, we back. Romani's texting me. So sorry about this, everybody. Yes, we're back. Okay, fantastic. Typical technical issues. This is always going to happen. So phase 3, this is where, sorry, let's just go back to this one. Phase 2, how might we address those challenges? So we want to shift people from the problem to the solution. And again, structure this how you will. But this is about getting people to think about the potential solutions. And again, the same thing here with the prioritization of experience drivers and solutions using either a discussion or a virtual voting tool. So moving on to phase 3, the why. So we want to do this to agree actions and priorities. So this could be done using either a matrix or again, a voting solution. So you've come up with your potential solutions. Now you want to work as a group to agree what are the actions and what are the priorities. So how are we going to prioritize the solutions we've come up with? And then how do we take those forward? So within this example, we used a matrix, a very simple matrix of impact and effort, and we're just able to see kind of what is the likely effort to implement this versus the impact for our employees. And the example outputs we had during the session were to automate the process of reminders around return to work dates, to provide managers with training on how to handle those conversations, and to create clear guidance on the key milestones within that journey. So this is about driving actions and getting to that next step conversation. So we're all clear on what the challenges are. That was phase 1. We know what the problems are today with this return to work experience. We've got a good idea of what we think might solve some of those challenges. We've prioritized them, and now we need to take them out to the business to gather real feedback and insights from our employees as to whether they're going to drive the change our employees are hoping for and create as much of an impact as we expect. So just a couple of tips here, conscious of time, but using timers is really key. So have time set for each of those activities. So for all of the 3 phases, having 10 minutes, let's say, allocated for each of those, with enough time to pause and have reflection as well. Mural has an inbuilt timer, which is really useful. So you can set 10 minutes on the timer and then it lets off a little buzz when it's finished, and then you can move on to the next activity. So this just prevents you from rushing. Again, as I've already said, pause after each phase and just invite some discussion. So get people to reflect on the exercise, reflect on their insights. And then the last one is potentially, the last one for the board, sorry, is no peeking. So block and lock the boards as you're moving along to keep the team engaged. So what I mean by this is you will create a long mural board for this activity with phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. I would recommend blocking phase 2 and phase 3 by putting a simple square over the top so that people aren't jumping ahead and seeing what's coming next. It just keeps people focused on the activity in hand. Make sure that people have time to practice using the board. This is really key. So if you are using Mural or a whiteboard, you want to make sure that people know how to navigate those tools, ideally before the session. So send them a quick, hey, we're using Mural tomorrow. You might want to familiarize yourself with the tool and access the link here. Don't be too ambitious with the number of ideation activities. As I say, stick to that 3 if you can. It's a perfect number for 60 minutes. Anything more than that, anything kind of beyond 4, and I would say the 4th would have to be a micro activity. You're not going to get through it. You're going to feel very frustrated at the end of the workshop that you didn't get through it all. And then the last is having a very clear narrative. Now, if you use this 3-phase approach for that ideation session, you are going to have a very clear narrative: problem, solutions, action. But if you go a little bit off piste or you decide to do something different, just make sure it follows a very clear narrative. Okay, so jumping ahead to next steps. These are some of the questions that you want to ask once you've wrapped up your ideation session. And this is about driving action and ownership. So we've spent time solutioning. We've got a good idea of what we want to do to solve this problem. How do we take this forward? So there are 4 sections here. Actions. What are the immediate actions that we have pulled together during this workshop? What key decisions have we made? Did we discuss, for example, oh, we can just make a quick change to the knowledge base article, or we can make a quick change to the service routing? Then who has documented those actions? The second is owners. So who is going to take ownership for this and drive this forward? So, for example, allocating certain actions to people that are in the room with you or in the virtual workshop with you. The third is, okay, let's do a timeline check. What are the expected timelines? When do we want to come back together to talk about this? How do we want to take this forward? So having a timestamp on, let's touch base in the next 2 weeks. We'll see how we've gotten with those changes. And then the last is validation. So we'll probably do another masterclass on this, but this is really key, right? So employee experience design, human-centered design thinking, you want to make sure that we are designing for the employees. So taking those potential solutions, those top 3 solutions, and going out to your employees and validating that these are important, that they are valuable, that they're going to drive the change that you want to see. Super key. So just a couple of tips here. Document your next steps in the ideation board. So keep everybody in Mural and just have a little checklist of next steps and timeframes. Don't jump to assigning owners. So don't just nominate people. Let them put themselves forward if you haven't already kind of selected natural owners. Ask open questions. So when do we want to meet? Or how do you think we can take this forward? It really encourages people to come forward and take a bit more ownership. And encourage people based on what they have contributed, and avoid taking ownership of everything. So as workshop facilitator, don't jump to taking ownership for everything. You want this to be collaborative. You want stakeholders to be taking ownership. And then the last is close. So just a couple of points around this, conscious of time, we want to get to Q&A, but this is about action and reflection. So as facilitator, when I'm running these sessions, we've talked about next steps. We've got a good idea of what we're going to take forward. I just remind people. So I'll just run through that next step list and say, okay, just a quick recap. These are the actions that we've taken. I think it was a really great session. Thank you all so much for your input and your creativity and your participation. Does anybody want to share their thoughts on how this workshop went? So moving from action to reflection. So get some feedback, see how everybody feels, and that will really help you build an even better agenda for your next workshop, depending on the objective you have going forward. So gather that feedback in the moment, see how everybody feels. Generally speaking, it will be very positive, especially if you've been kind of an upbeat and engaging facilitator. People will give you that positive feedback as well. But likewise, there might be some really important nuggets for you to take forward. So just the last kind of run through of workshop tips. So we've gone through the agenda. That's how we structure the 90 minutes. But a few tips based on experience. So communication, make sure there are no surprises by sending an update to the team before your session. So again, as I've already touched on, being really clear with the objectives, let people know what's happening. Don't let the workshop be a surprise. Otherwise, you will get 1 or 2 people joining the call saying, why are we here? This could have been an email, or we could just do a couple of meetings, or I don't have 90 minutes. The second is timing. So generally would recommend that you run these workshops, if it's a 90-minute workshop, in the morning. Avoid the post-afternoon slump where people will turn their cameras off and they'll be a little bit sleepy and they need coffee and they're not super participative or engaged. The third is examples. So as I've already touched upon, bring some examples of how design workshops are used by leading organizations. This is particularly important if you've got people that are a little bit skeptical about workshops or it's their first time. It just helps kind of boost everybody's energy at the beginning because, you know, everybody wants to be a bit like Google, right? The fourth is facilitation. Remember that your role is to facilitate the design workshop. Try and avoid as best as you can jumping in and leading discussions. I know that can be hard, and sometimes you'll need to balance both because you may well be part of the process that you're discussing, but just remember that you want to give people space to have a share of voice. You don't want to have 1 or 2 people in the room dominating the conversation. Otherwise, it tends to leave people out, and you might be missing out on some really good ideas and solutions. The next is engagement. So ask the team to keep their cameras on if possible and bring the energy. So as facilitator, it's really important for you to remain positive, even if, like me, you have technical issues for whatever reason. Just keep coming back, keep it engaging, keep people high energy if you can. So keeping your own camera on is really key, and just making sure that you're controlling each of those activities and being enthusiastic about what's coming next. And then the last is prep. So check your tools work and check your team can access the platforms that you're using. As I've already said, we've done Zoom workshops and no one can access Zoom. We have put Mural out there and Mural has been blocked by the company's firewall. So be prepared and check that those tools work before your workshop. That said, as we've seen today, perfect example, things will always kind of go wrong. There is always going to be the unexpected. So just prepare yourself for that, work through it. It's not the end of the world. You're going to be fine. Fantastic. So just a couple of extra resources as well before we jump to a few minutes for Q&A. There are plenty of design thinking books that I would recommend that I will follow up in the post-event email with a list of. A couple just to call out here, if you are still thinking, do we want to do workshops? Do we need those lots of stakeholders in a room? This book will really help you get on side with that. So this is Rebel Ideas, which is the power of diverse thinking. I've also got a few other books here that I won't pull out all of them, but the Creative Thinking Handbook, a few books on visual collaboration that I'll send through, and design thinking. So if design thinking is new to you, absolutely check out some of those resources. Potentially engage with your customer experience teams. If you're a big organization, the likelihood is your customer experience team will have an approach to creative design here. And feel free to access other organizations like IDEO and Luma. So I did my qualification in human-centered design with Luma. Would definitely recommend checking them out. And also an organization called AJ and Smart. They are a fantastic design agency with tons of resources online. Just briefly, an extension of our 90-minute workshop is an EX Design Lab. So this is what we do with our clients. So yes, we run these 90-minute workshops, but if the scope is much bigger or the objective is a little bit meatier or we need more stakeholders in the room, we tend to run what we call our EX Design Lab, which is everything I've described and that little bit more specific to your organization and your industry. So feel free to reach out, be more than happy to talk you through the format of this design lab and talk about how we can potentially support your organization as well. With that said, we'll jump to the Q&A, and it looks like we've got quite a few questions here. So I'm just going to dive in. Let me stop sharing as well so you can see me full screen. Okay. Is there a recommended participant size for working on a single board? So in Mural, there is no cap to the number of people you can have on your board. So I think it starts to tip over the edge at about 100 participants, but that doesn't mean you can't have more. But I would say for a 90-minute workshop, you want to cap the participants at 10 maximum. The perfect number is between 5 and 10. I would normally say 8. And this just means that you're not having people overloaded with conversations, you're not derailing the conversation, and you're keeping pretty focused. So hopefully that answers your question, Becky. But 8 is the magic number. So do I recommend anonymous ideation or named? This is a really good one. I think if the room is relatively small, having people named is okay because you're typically going to know who's who, and a lot of people will call out things that they've already called out before in separate meetings. So being anonymous doesn't really add much value. However, there is a lot of value to silent ideation and doing it anonymously so that people feel comfortable sharing a lot more. So it really just depends on the organization. It depends if you've got 5 people versus 10 people, and it also depends on kind of how contentious the subject is. So if it's quite a sensitive process, then people might feel more comfortable being anonymous. Just gauge how you feel, assess the topic, and see what works best. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's have a look. Have I ever dealt with large groups, and what is an optimal workshop attendee size? So already kind of addressed this question. So yes, ideal workshop size would be around 8 for 90 minutes. And large groups, yes. We've done what would be more focus groups with approximately 40 to 50 people managers for a large organization here. And the best tip for those kind of workshops is to scale back the scope. So we spoke about the 3-phase approach, which does work really well within that 90-minute period for between 5 to 10 people. But if you've got a lot more people with a lot more ideas, posting a lot more post-it notes on your ideation board, you might want to strip it back to 2 exercises, or maybe even 1, depending on, you know, just how many participants you have. So just be mindful that your agenda will have to shift if the attendee size increases. Okay. Where do I buy these awesome teas from? A very good question. They're not for sale, but whoever has been using the chat will definitely get a free one. So that's great. Thanks for that question. So interested to hear what your top tips are for increasing engagement and keeping the energy high during the workshops, particularly those virtual that have a tendency to remain on mute. So yeah, this is a really, really great question. Typically, I think it's about setting the tone early on. So if in your communications pre-workshop, you've said there's an expectation that we're going to be pretty active, that we are collaborating and sharing and having cameras on and coming off mute, then people will know, right, I need to get dressed this morning. I'm going to be on camera. I'm going to be more actively involved in this meeting. So set those expectations before the workshop. When you start the workshop, if you do that introductory exercise that I've told you, people are going to be a little bit more relaxed. They're going to feel like they're part of the conversation because you've asked them something personal. It keeps people engaged. It means that nobody gets left out. The other element to that as well that I would probably suggest is when you get to the end of each phase. So when you get to the end of phase 1, we've discussed what the problems are. Be very targeted with who you ask to talk about what they've suggested. Sometimes that helps prevent the 1 or 2 people that just take up the share of voice, and by 45 minutes in, you've got people just, I'm not going to bother, I'm just going to keep myself on mute because John and Joe are the ones that are taking up most of the conversation. So make sure you're actively calling people out in the workshop to share their thoughts and ideas and experiences. It just keeps people on their toes and it keeps people participating. And I would probably say for you to keep the high energy, you know, it's 90 minutes is pretty intense when you're constantly facilitating and thinking about what's coming next and what could go wrong or what do we need to do. So just make sure that you're fully prepared, fully rested, you're ready to go before that session. So let's just have a look at other questions. We've got some questions in the chat as well. We've got a couple minutes to go. What if we don't have an as-is map due to the lack of visibility? What's the best approach to get value of the workshop? Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So where we've had a workshop similar before, we have simply asked one of the stakeholders at the beginning of the call to talk us through the process as is. And then we invite other people to give different perspectives so that we at least have a verbal description of what the process is at the moment. So really pinpointing the stakeholder or the owner of that process and asking them to describe it at the start of the call is really helpful. So where you can't get the as-is map, that just generally helps people align. But make sure you factored that time into your agenda and make sure that people know what to expect and you have prepared that stakeholder to say, look, I'm going to call on you at the beginning of this session to give us a very brief overview, a high-level overview of the process as it is. And then the specifics you'll tend to draw out during that phase 1 problem framing exercise anyway. So hopefully that helps. So one last question before we end today's session. So how do you make sure people don't stick to just one idea being discussed and we're able to complete the full agenda? Yeah, this is really a great question as well. Thank you. This is about you as a facilitator, keeping to time and keeping control of the activities. So making sure that people are exploring different ideas on the board. So potentially that's you saying, okay, we've discussed this one for a couple of minutes. What about this post-it note on the board here? Can somebody take themselves off mute and tell me a little bit more about this? That will make sure that you're getting that variety of perspective. But from an agenda perspective, it's all about how you control the room and you guide people from each phase to the next. And for you, that's keeping a clock, keep your phone out so that you've got a timer, you know what to expect, you're using the timer tools, and you've just got people kind of flowing from one activity to another with you as that controller. And so guiding people through, I think that's really key. I think we've still got a few people on the line. Just one last question that I want to address is, for a 90-minute workshop, will one facilitator be enough, or ideally 2 facilitators better? My personal view is that 1 is enough, but it's always good to have someone in the background taking notes if you can. And so not necessarily a co-facilitator, but just someone that's capturing those verbal examples if you're not recording the session. So I think that's really good, is to kind of have like a co-host, but someone that is supporting you if you have any technical issues, but mainly just capturing the sentiment in the room, I think is really key. But if you follow the structure and you have a very clear agenda and you are prepared and you know what to expect, you can totally facilitate a 90-minute workshop on your own. So fantastic. Thank you all so much for participating. We are at the 45-minute mark point. Again, lots of content here, a very clear kind of 90-minute structure for you to take away. We will follow up with the PowerPoint slides as well, so you can refer to these. You can always refer back to the YouTube recording as well. So, you know, if you're not planning to have your workshop for a few weeks or potentially a few months, absolutely, you've got that as a reference as well. And any questions, please reach out. Please connect with us on LinkedIn. Let us know if you want us to have a look over your agenda. More than happy to help. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. And thanks for bearing with me with all those technical issues as well. It's always going to happen. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.